and like, some of this is, trolls take advantage of this, right? They're like, you're going to disengage when I bother you enough. And that's their power, right? Is to get people to disengage because I move the world, which is technically true, but also you're a scumbag and maybe you should be mean, not be mean and be nice, right? I don't know, be nice to people. That's a good message. Um, they don't have a check, because if you did that to me in real life, and I've told people this, in fact, I've done it, I'll punch you or backhand you. I'll physically damage you for sure. For sure, I've done it many times. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not going to get away with that in person. And when you can get away with it, it just warps your view of everything around you. And you don't have an intimate relationship. I mean, honestly, if there's no threat of somebody pushing back on you, there's no intimacy in the relationship at all.
There's no intimacy, and it creates a ton of anxiety. Because on a certain level, if there's never any reality checking, you're like, so I guess I have all the power and everything is just in my mind. And so where am I going and what's going
on? All right. Hello, everybody. I am back with Kathyrn, everybody's favorite host of the Thunder Bay Conference. How you doing, Kathyrn?
I'm doing great. Yeah.
All right.
Spring has sprung, and it's warm enough I can walk outside without 10 layers, so I'm super happy.
Yeah, well, that's the dangers of living in the wild Northlands of Canada.
It is.
Also beautiful up there. So, yeah. So today we're going to continue our conversation on the intimacy crisis and hopefully make some progress with this. And I'm always, as I said, I'm always afraid to talk about the intimacy crisis without some female around. So Kathyrn has graciously donated her time to help me explore this topic without getting into hopefully too much trouble. And one of the things I've been thinking of is, because intimacy for me is just this quality of the relationship, right? Where you're focused on the relationship and you're not focused on, say, the objects of the relationship, because really, you can be intimate with a door. Hopefully you're not, trying to do anything dirty with the door. But you have a certain relationship to everything around you. And we have shifted our focus away from relationship and to object, which I think is super dangerous. Hence the intimacy crisis, which again, I think, sort of precedes or causes the meaning crisis. And so when we're talking about intimacy, and I know, Kathyrn, you follow me on Twitter. I've been talking about this Age of Gnosis concept, which someday I'm gonna get to the writing on. I have lots of notes on that too. And I think the two are related, because in Age of Gnosis, it's the knowledge as propositions, and propositions refer to objects in many cases. And so we get into this objective worldview, right? This world of objects where there are just things. And the intimacy crisis is that. It's focusing on the things over focusing on the relationships. Not that things aren't important. Of course they are. People are even more important, right? But you really need to be aware of the relationship you have. And one of the problems that we run into a lot of times is people get into spaces where they don't have any intimacy. They don't have a quality relationship yet, because they haven't built it, because it's not free, right? It's not transactional in any way. And so they get into trouble because they don't have the affordances for making mistakes, right? They don't have the particularities of the space, whether that be language or action, like how should you dress, right? How close can you stand to people? It's one of those things, right? Those are all qualities. And that, I think, is where we fall down, because one thing I think we've lost, whether we had it or not, including for persons, right? Maybe some person had the ability to go out and speak to strangers, and now they've lost that, because I think you can lose it. Everybody talks about stages of development, but actually you can lose those development stages. No one talks about that. But I think that's what's participating in the intimacy crisis, is we've lost the ability to interact with new spaces and new situations, and kind of learn what is appropriate language, what is appropriate dress, what is an appropriate distance, where do we sit in all that? And so you've got like a therapy background, right? Is that something that you deal with?
Yeah, well, it's interesting as you're talking, there's so many therapy lingo sort of buttons lighting up because one of the like a major school of thought is object relations, which is and in all psychodynamic approaches, you part of the study is seeing how you take people and objects outside the world and you create space for them internally, and they all become internal objects. And so, as you're talking about how we have focused on the objects instead of the relations, there's very much an internal version of that as well, where it's not just you doing that with the outside world, but even the internal objects, which are people, become just sort of like the worst versions of that, where they are not updated regularly. There's a lot of projection. So I make my internal objects into my like little versions of me. So what I would feel in that situation instead of what that person feels in that situation. Or the opposite way, you introject them instead of projecting out to them. You take on their emotions as if they're your own emotions. You take on their thoughts as if they're your thoughts. And so there's not as clean of differentiation between yourself and these internal objects, which
Right.
means then you have issues with relating properly, obviously, but also you don't update them. So one of the big issues with people who are narcissistic or borderline is you create an internal object of someone. So I have an internal map of Mark, what he loves, what he does, but then I don't update it. So as Mark becomes a different person, or I see Mark in different environments, I consistently still refer to you as if you were that same static being. And you see this, I mean, Twitter is just like a heyday of projection and introjection and like craziness. And I think very much to what you're saying, we have, by not being with people, the nice thing is when I project onto you and I talk as if that's true, then you stop me real quick if we're in person and you're like, excuse me, I didn't have that thought. Why are you treating me this way? I don't appreciate it. And you get a reality check, which we desperately need. But online or with relationships we find to be disposable, those reality checks we often will just use to reinforce how crazy the world is and how nuts they are instead of actually using it to update ourselves through humility and say, oh, I got it wrong. I need to update who Mark is because Mark is a person and not just a static set of values. So, anyways, yes, there's a lot going on with what you're saying.
Yeah, I like that. There's a lot there. Yeah, I wanna point out a few things and maybe do some reframing, which you don't have to engage in at all. I wanna more for the audience, just say sort of the way I would frame some of that stuff, right? Because everything you said is bang on, for sure. So one of the things Peterson talks about, I'm probably gonna go in reverse order, just because I do. Being dyslexic has advantages and disadvantages. So one of the things Peterson talks about is if all women are rejecting you, the problem is not all women. Like it's a
Yes.
little hint there, guy, right? And the danger of the internet in that aspect is you're going to find somebody else who's crazy in exactly the way you are, who's going to validate your experience, and that's really bad for you. Really bad because you're going to discount the 10 people telling you, no, dude, you're not making any sense, and oversample the one person going, oh yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. And it's just natural for us. It's a tendency that we have to sort of escape. The other thing that came up was, I know Joey is the one that sort of turned me on to this. It happened in a comment on a video that we did on Vanderclay's channel, which I think was subsequently deleted, where this woman who also worked with a bunch of people in some sort of therapeutic type of a setting was saying the number one problem she sees is people do not know where they end and other things begin. And I was like, yeah, that's really good. That is a problem, right? Discernment or differentiation between you and other things, and this whole idea, and I'm gonna tie it right back into sort of current events of not understanding that somebody's feelings in a country halfway across the world are not your feelings. And even if you're right about what they're feeling, and you probably aren't because it's halfway across the world, it's probably a place you've never been to, uh, you can't embody that because you're not there, right? And this overemphasis on empathy sort of creates that problem. And the last sort of reframing I want to do is to say, uh, because of that boundary issue, or maybe what causes that boundary issue of not knowing where you end and other things begin, is this idea of the imagination, and what John Vervaeke calls the imaginal realm, or the imaginal as such. We call it the imaginal realm. Um, when you're there more than you're out in the world, and being online again, not to diss online too hard, because we're online, but we met online. Like,
Yeah.
we're way online. So unfortunately only met in person once. We got to fix that.
Yeah.
It encourages you to live in the fantasy in your head. It encourages you to live in your imagination. You can't do without your imagination. I'm not trying to demonize the imagination. You need that to make predictions about the world. It's how the predictions are made. But also, I don't know why no one can hear my purple talking unicorn, but it just seems like this is useful because no one else. I talk to my purple talking unicorn. Damn it, he's really smart. He's got good things to say. And so when we confuse that with, what's in my head versus what I heard you say versus what you actually said, which is a common problem with me. It's a lot of people just project right onto me, and that projection. I've had a lot of problems with projection, my whole life. Right? People will ask me questions like, what's your favorite food, and I'll be like, because to me that's a silly question. Like, what's my favorite food on what any given day, or maybe breakfast to lunch to dinner? Because there's certain things I will never eat for breakfast ever, right? And there's certain things I will never eat for dinner. There's certain things I will never eat for lunch, right? And I have a very sort of structured way of thinking about these things. You don't eat that at that time of day. What are you, a psychopath? Like, what's wrong, right? So I would say something like hot dog, and then they think like, oh, your favorite food is hot dog, and they try to feed me hot dogs all the time, and it's like, no, don't do that. Like, that's not how that works, right? And people don't, so it's local updating, right? Updating within the day, right? Not just updating because a life event happened. And I
Yeah.
think, more important than mere updating, not that, again, bang on. There's also just, no matter how long we talk and how much time we spend together, even in person, there's always going to be things about me you don't know, and vice versa. Always. Right. And so you never had a good picture of the person. You might have had a good enough picture of the person.
Yeah.
But then good enough for what? Like, we seem to get along just fine. And accommodated me wonderfully at Thunder Bay. And that worked out well for Pastor Paul as well, coincidentally. And, that was great. We'd had lots of conversations before that on Discord and such not. And, and we get to know each other a bit better. I got to spend time with your kids, which was wonderful because you're wonderful children. No real surprise.
Nah.
I mean, I didn't know your husband that well. Maybe, maybe he's a little shady, but no, he's great. So yeah, but I mean, there's always more, right? There's always more that you can, sort of learn about a person, and to the point. I mean, not to, as people talk about the break the fourth wall or whatever too much, but like, we spent a long time just chatting and catching up before we started the recording, right? Just to get back on the same page, and sort of, I found out more about you today, right? And that's wonderful. I mean, that's your intimacy, right? That's your quality of connection. And the reason why we have that, between us, that relationship, that quality relationship, is because I recognize I don't know that much about you. Like, I don't know what your favorite food is. Eat lunch, breakfast, or dinner. I have no idea.
Yeah, and to pull it to what you were saying before, it's like, well, we not only do you need local updating, but it's like, I will change and you will change. And if you get locked into seeing other people as not persons, persons who change and adjust and whose loves change and goals change and are genuinely impacted as people, then your ability to engage with them in ways where they aren't simply data sets who give you information about yourself is completely lost. And depending on your goals, maybe that's fine. Maybe you're like, look, all I want to do in the world is like get a lot of money and I don't care about anything else. Not that I would advise this, but you can actually, lots of psychopaths do just fine and achieve that goal perfectly well. But since we're talking about the intimacy crisis and the fact that for most people to have happy, satisfying lives, you need to have real relationships.
Right.
And the ability for people to go up that developmental hierarchy you were talking about and then stay there has been lost. So a lot of people aren't making it up to the point of recognizing other people as being people in the same way that they are, not with the same value mapping, not with the same experiences, but with that same unique internal world, with an ongoing changing identity. Not completely like randomly different. You're not talking new psyches, but
Right.
things change and they change as people the way that you change as people. A lot of people don't even reach that level.
Right.
And then if they reach that level, the environments that we are living in right now is making it very hard for a lot of people to maintain that level of
Right.
other awareness.
Well, I like that. That sort of segues into a sore spot for me, and I know Sally Joe was probably already screaming about this. You know, we had that BOM marriage crisis chat, right? And so you can obtain a marriage in a largely transactional set of events in a transactional way fairly easily, especially if it's only one of you, right?
Yeah.
Because the other one has hope or, you know, whatever, like is actually in love and, you know, whatever, right? That's not that hard, ultimately, although it is hard, right? But to do it right is way harder, right? That requires real intimacy, and real intimacy is all about how much can you piss me off before I storm out? Like that's intimacy is the thing that allows you not to storm out. That's right. Intimacy allows you to afford the other person a wide berth, if you will, right? Or a lot of leeway, however you want to think of it. But then, even if you achieve marriage, you know, how do you enhance and improve and grow, and how do you get the things out of marriage that Kathyrn and Eamon have, you know, as opposed to what you see, you know, with the celebrities breaking up and people cheating and, you know, all of that stuff. That's actually the much more interesting and important stuff, and that's why the marriage crisis chat existed in BOM, although it got destroyed by people who had no marriages and no interest in learning anything but how to solve their hello crisis, which precedes the dating crisis, which precedes the marriage crisis. So they were a few steps away from the actual marriage crisis. But again, I think a lot of that too has to do with this deep confusion, and I've seen this. You kind of see it exemplified online. People are like, some people don't have internal monologues, and it's like, the fact of the matter is, no matter how deep you think you are internally, there are other people that are deeper, and there are other people that are shallower, and you need to learn to deal with that because you know they're not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with them.
Yeah, it's true. And I think that's a perfect example. Like, it's so easy for us to imagine that other people see and experience the world the way that we do. So one of the ways that obviously any relationship brings us starkly to the fore, but definitely as a mom, and definitely a mom who has boys, that like comes right to your face because you're with them all the time and you have to track with them so you can anticipate their needs really, really well. And it's boys are just very different, even from girls who are more masculine. They're very different. And so I experienced that difference, but I found it so helpful when I read Why Gender Matters. And it is written by a neuropsych guy for teachers and for parents. And it outlines the differences cognitively for boys and girls through developmental stages. And the differences of things where it's like boys see different colors. They mostly color in blue and black, and they mostly draw things that are moving because they mostly see things that are moving. They see the room differently. Like they literally, the visual is different than what women see. They hear different frequencies than women hear. And if they're gay, they hear different frequencies than straight men. Like there are physiological differences between boys and girls, men and women. And you can say, well, chicken and egg, where does that start from? It doesn't really matter at the end of the day when you're trying
Right.
to know how to relate to the person in front of you. And so it's when we're talking about relating to other people, the recognition that the world that they actually see in their head and the things that they hear are actually different than you, even if you're in the same space. And that can get lost when people are trying to empathize on a very flat level of like, oh, well, how would I experience what you're experiencing? Or I can imagine what my kid is feeling. Like, actually, you probably really can't, especially if they're not even the same gender as you.
Right.
Like, there's just a big gap. And so when you're going to talk like, okay, well, intimacy crisis, I think that deep recognition of the difference, like you say, okay, well, somebody has different cognitions than you. They hear a voice in their head or they don't. They see an image or they don't. That doesn't track with intelligence. It tracks with how you relate to your environment and the way that you relate to and organize yourself.
Right.
And you're not going to relate to and organize yourself and your environment the way other people do.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that sort of circles back to something I've been pondering for literally decades at this point, which is, and other people have talked about this, the rise of nerd culture, so-called nerd culture, right? And one of the tropes or stereotypes in nerd culture is that, they're wicked smart, but like actually their human relation skills are terrible, right? Like engineers are just horrible at talking to people in general. I mean, this is absolutely true. This is how I made a lot of my money, because I speak engineer and not engineer, and I speak multiple engineering dialects, so I can talk to software engineers, I can talk to systems guys, and I can talk to business guys, right? I can talk to guys on the street and explain the same thing to them in a way that's meaningful to them,
Yeah.
right? And not a lot of people can do that, and hurrah for me, whatever, who cares? I have other much worse problems that I would gladly trade that skill to solve. So don't be thinking I'm all like yay on that. But I think that's part of it. So we have this intuition that certain people don't relate the way other people do, but at the same time, we do have this rise. This is part of the age of gnosis, in my opinion, of this emphasis on intelligence or intellect or
Mm-hmm.
smart people or rationality, more likely,
Mm-hmm.
through propositions, because that's how we communicate. It's not the best way to communicate. It's the only way we communicate, which no one talks about, right? There's a lot of body language, especially with people like me, just talk with their hands. Um, and it's important, right? It's important to get the flavor, right? It's important to understand tone. People don't understand tone. That means they're getting enchanted by the likes of Sam Harris, and I have 2
Mm-hmm.
videos on that. You know, there's a lot of there where people are not really paying attention to all these other aspects of intimacy or quality of relationship, because there's a quality to how I speak that has nothing to do with the words that I'm using. And
Yeah.
if you're projecting, you're not even picking up the words I'm using. And so now we're having a real, I'm having this right now on my Discord server right now. There's real communication problem. Like that, I didn't say that. I didn't make a claim. I didn't use that word. You used this word incorrectly, by the way. No, I didn't. Oh, give me the dictionary definition. Oh, I can't. Oh, you can't. Right. Okay. That's because you misused the word and you know it. And like you did it unconsciously or whatever, but that's a big problem. We're focused, our attention, and I think Jonathan Peugeot's right, the world's attention is on propositions which aren't giving us a flavor for the world or for other people. I mean, the proposition that you're, in some occupied country, right? It's like, well, first, is it an occupied country, right? Or you're in a war zone when there's no fighting near you, right? We throw these words around, and is that what's happening on the ground? Do people on the ground feel like they're in a war zone or they're in an occupation, or are they just going about their day and doing their thing? And it doesn't make any difference what government is in charge of them this week, because that doesn't affect them.
And to tie together 2 of your thoughts, like 90% of our communication is nonverbal when you're with someone. 90% of your communication. If you cut yourself down to that 10%, all of a sudden, if you have any level of self-awareness, you know that you will be misunderstanding other people. And you also know that you won't understand them properly. So then we fixate on, well, we need to make sure that I understand what you mean with what you're saying. So define for me what you mean. And then we get into this mockery of like, oh, what does is mean? What, like this, like, you can mock the attempts at the language and get frustrated with how pedantic it feels. And I have run into this online where people will be like, why are you making me define all these words? And I'm like, because I don't know you in person. I have no idea what you look like or smell like. I have no idea what you mean when you use those words. And I can't go to a definition from a book or the internet and assume that that's what you mean, especially when we're talking about things that are either super personal or super abstracted.
Right.
Which means that language and communication either is only projection and introjection, or it becomes very clunky, very slow, not spontaneous, and it can feel manipulative to people, because if you did that in real life, it would feel like you're trying to lawyer their words against you. You're like, right. I'm actually just trying to understand what the heck you mean, because what you're saying doesn't sound very good, and I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you mean something else. So explain more what you mean. But if you do that in real life, people don't like that because it feels like you're trying to leverage something against them. So all of that, just kind of pair some of your thoughts about the Age of Gnosis, and then some of this, like the lack of in-personness forces us into that mode, and then it creates all kinds of problems that we don't have a solution for yet.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, we don't have a solution for, I would say, anymore. Like, we used to know how to fix these things, right? We got together. There were square dances. You lived close to your neighbors. You knew who your neighbors were. You interacted in community activities. The center of the village was the church, right? There was a monastery on the outskirts of town, right? There were these ways of interacting, and we've lost them, and we've reduced a lot of things, because a lot of what you said just boils down to flat out reduction, right? Like just reducing things down. And we've reduced a lot of these things to propositions and just mere words. And the problem is, I mean, even just in the US, vastly different usage of the same word from north to south, east to west, middle of the country, the so-called flyover states, right? And even within the South, it just, what does barbecue mean in Texas? And what does barbecue mean in the Carolinas? Because and the thing, oh, that's a trivial example. People get into fights about this, and I do mean fist fights. This is barbecue, serious business down here. Don't be messing with barbecue, man. Like, and it is a kind of a silly example, but it's kind of not. Like, you would think barbecue, which is a style of cooking, it would be pretty straightforward. Everybody knows how to cook barbecue, right? It's like, you don't know how to cook barbecue. You've been to Carolina barbecue, right? You don't know how to cook barbecue. You ain't from Texas, right? Yeah. Like, and that's about your personal experience. And when you're not with somebody personally, I like the way you put this, right? Like, there's two ways. There's the abstract way, but there's also the personal way, right? There's two ways that meaning breaks down when you're trying to communicate in mere propositions, words, right? When you're just using words, as opposed to, well, I've been with you in person. I've seen you like interact, right? I've seen you around your family now, right? And so I have a better flavor for how you use the language just based on watching your actions while you're speaking. And the one great sin of the internet is that we lose all of that. It's very, very hard to do that. I think one of the things I should have talked about this in my article on petersonsphere.com more. Peterson really exemplifies and shows you the action of his thinking, right, on the screen. And that's extremely unusual. Another thing that I think actually Pastor Paul Vanderklay does very well, right? He's like, listen, I'm just throwing out ideas and you guys are helping me think through them, right? That's, to me, that's much better use of the internet than many of the other uses of the internet. And because they're not projecting, right? But they are taking an action on the screen. They're not making a prognostication. We've gone from TED Talks, right, which is somebody spewing their ridiculous idea in many cases, although there are some very good TED Talks, including Peterson's, which are in the top 10%. At people, like just spewing, these are my ideas, and blah, and they get an audience, and there's a cadence and a rhythm that you can adopt to give you a quote better TED Talk. That's enchantment, by the way. Don't do that, right? Or do that carefully, right? Do it for the good, please, not randomly. But we've migrated from that, right? Because the world's biggest YouTube channel for conversation was Joe Rogan. Right. And now all of a sudden you've gone from TED Talks, and TED Talks were never that big, to Joe Rogan, who gets like top end TED Talk numbers every podcast he does. Right. But that's conversational. And I think that, there's a new evolution of that, hopefully coming, where, there's a way to engage the audience, a way to get to better the audience through the engagement. And that's one of those things I'd love to work on if I had $1 million. If I could win the lottery tomorrow, I've already got a map for that idea. And to me, that's restoring the skill of intimacy. So one of the problems they ran into, I don't know if you saw our Symbolic World Summit wrap-up video. I got over 1,000 views on that one. It's a beautiful video. Oh yeah.
Oh, what?
So the problem was people didn't know how to ask questions. They had no idea how to just formulate and just ask their question. And there was one guy in particular, and we do talk about this in that video. And basically what he was doing was spewing his prophecy as, and then disguising it as a question. And like, you can't do that. Like and no one pushed back on him, and they fixed the problem instead, which, I'm not a big fan of. But that's not his fault. At some point, it's our fault as a society for not teaching him to ask good questions, right? For not giving him what is the quality of your relationship with the people on the stage and the people in the audience. Because, there's 3 parties involved, right? At least, I mean, maybe 4. Maybe there's the guy managing the questions, who is John Harris, who did an excellent job. There's the guy asking the question, there's the people on the stage, and then there's the audience. We're all involved in this, right? And maybe there's a greater audience of the people who are going to watch it, recorded, which I highly recommend because it was a wonderful event. But you're not considering any of that.
Yeah.
Right. You're stuck in your projection, and you're like, well, I really have something to say, and I really want to say this thing. And so I'm just going to say this thing and then couch it as a question. Are you just grabbing attention? I don't want to be cynical, right? Because I don't think he was just grabbing attention, although he was certainly doing that. I think his main motivation was, tell me if I'm nuts. Right? This is the problem I see. This is the solution I came up with. Tell me how far off base I am. Right? Which I think is related to John Vervaeke's concept of domicide. Like, where am I in the world? Am I seeing the world correctly? Am I diagnosing the problem correctly? Am I coming up with a reasonable solution? Because if you break down his question, that's what I heard in there. I mean, I heard a lot of other things too, but like, that's what I heard was this cry for help from, and Sally Joe's just completely, torn up about this. Like, this poor young man who's quite capable and could really do things in the world is crippled in some fundamental way. And that, to some extent, is on us as a society. Not me personally. I don't know where he lives. He doesn't live here. But also on me, because I failed. Sally's the only one that stepped up and said something to him. I was just too wrapped up in my own, there was a lot going on at that conference. There's a lot of people there. So yeah, I mean, I see this kind of thing everywhere. That to me is all intimacy crisis.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's like a direct fruit of postmodernism, where you say there are no relations except what you decide there are, and it's all completely up to you to determine. So have fun with that. Hope you come up with some relations you enjoy, and continue your self-imposed relationships with everything around you, including all the objects inside yourself, until you're dead. Or you can do the modernist approach and say, there are all of these objects, and they have no spiritual relationship to you. You can relate to them physically, but your truest self has no relationship to it. And once you're gone, it's all over. And so essentially, if you just zoom back a little bit, you don't have any relationship with anything because you're gone in a split second
Mm,
over the time frame.
mhm,
So
mhm.
both of those moves orphan you from everything around you and they isolate you. And it's incredibly difficult when you're given that message, not even explicitly. You know, a lot of people don't sit down and think about modernism and postmodernism, but it's in all the little short sayings you get, all the little tidbits of
Mm,
wisdom, all the encouragements for how you move out in the world. That has been the frame for how many hundreds of years in our society. And so you have to either internally generate another option, or you have to hook yourself into um, essentially a religious frame, which is all that will offer you anything other than that.
right,
And our current world says, and to engage with that religious frame, you have to figure out the propositions that are accurate. Otherwise,
right.
you can't pick one. And then you have to uphold the accuracy of these claims, and that's how you relate to this. And if you can't and won't do that, you don't have access to any deeper, longer meaning, and you're just stuck in nihilism forever, which is
Mm.
happening.
Yeah, I like that. I like too. You use the word orphan, and I thought that was an isolated. I thought those were really good words, right? These are very good. Yeah, intimacy crisis is, the manifestation of that is domicide, and what's one method of domicide is being in an orphanage, right? You don't have a home. That's explicitly what it is, right? And what is that? What is that? It's a form of isolation. It's not the only form of isolation, but it's a form of isolation, and some of it is self-imposed. Um, I think, yeah, a lot of the I like the way you're talking about this. I mean, I know it. Unfortunately, I know we both lament that it didn't come up in the Thunder Bay conference. This unconsciousness idea, right? So a lot of these are unconscious signals that you're getting about you have to figure out the propositions on your own. You have to figure out the frame on your own. Shout out to Agapic Orientation, my friend Manuel's channel, right? He has a series called Finding the Frame, right? Because people don't know how. They think they do. They think they can, and a lot of people like you can't. I'm sorry, you can't. You're standing on the shoulders of all the people who've died before you were born, right? And a bunch of people around you today that are, Elon Musk is remaking the world. Whatever you may think of that, I'm not a big fan actually, but big fan of his Twitter work. But his electric cars, I see not so much. But he is shaping the world, right? And so I'm on Twitter, like or X, whatever he's calling it this week. I'm in that milieu, and I don't
Yeah.
like whatever. I'm submitted to it. I'm fine with what he's doing, and I would have been fine with it before he took over, because I was on it before he took over, and it was okay. Like I wasn't happy with it. If I could have owned it and done something different, I probably would have. I'd like to think I would have. I
Mm-hmm.
can't prove that, and I can't prove that what I would do works because what the hell do I know? Like I haven't run a business that big before, right? And so it is that engendering of this humility that we miss because we're told unconsciously, oh no, you can and you have to make the frame yourself. You have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's going to determine the quality of relationships. If you think of the world in terms of politics, bad frame, or economics, right, or just money, right, or just capitalism, those are all the same. They're all terrible ways of thinking about the world because they're all strictly transactional and materialistic, right? They're material first, material. It's really money that motivates people to do things. It's like, that can't possibly be true, but sure, whatever. Or it's only the political power, whatever ridiculous definition you're using of power that is not mine, which is correct, by the way. See navigating patterns, my channel, right? You get stuck in these transactional frames. Like politics is a transactional frame, regardless of your conception of power. Economics is a transactional frame. Like it couldn't be any more explicit, right? But
Yeah.
even things like psychology in general is very transactional. You get a diagnosis of something, right? Now you have a thing. Ooh, I have a thing. Ooh, very materialistic. And then I can work on it. And maybe I'll fix it, or maybe I can't fix it, but I can make it better, right? And so you get caught up in this set of transactions, right? This set of procedures, rather than, maybe looking for a radical change, or dare I say a miracle or something, right? Which is more possible. One of the stories that Peterson tells, I mean, he's told it a few times. I don't know if you've gotten on to the importance of this. To me, it's just a whopping. It's one of those stories that he tells, and I'm like, when he tells us everybody should just, their jaw should drop, and like their life should change for real. Don't matter who you are. He talks about this woman who, was convinced that her brother had an inappropriate sexual relationship with her when, and then it just turns out like they were children, like really young. I don't think he actually mentions the ages involved, but he's like, do you think maybe it was just like a mistake and there was no intent because he was too young to know what the hell was going on? Or, he couldn't have had that intent because he didn't have that level of awareness, because when you're that age, eh, most kids don't. And bang, she's fixed. That's it. And it took a while to get there. Like, I'm not denigrating the process. There was a process, went through the process. But even Peterson's a little slow on the uptake. Forgot to ask, how old were you when this happened? Would have been my first question, but whatever. Like, like different strokes. And then, and maybe you needed that longer relationship to have that pop. But then bang, overnight, whole life changed. Just one reframing, right, to a more realistic frame, right, that doesn't assume maliciousness, because a lot of conspiracy thinking is just assuming malicious intent in others, right, or in groups of people, because something happened and they must have known that was going to happen because the world is rational. And it's like, oh, I got news for you about A, how little people know, and B, how rational they are, which is on a scale of 0 to 10, usually closer to 0 than 1.
One thing that would be interesting is to hear long term if she made more like broader changes, because when you see something like that, where it's a frame that has that malicious intent, and if you were to think about it rationally, it doesn't actually give the explanation you're treating it like it does.
Right.
So my brother did this to me when we were 4 and he was 3, and this thing happened, and that is why all of these negative things have happened in my life. That is why I have this internal negative state. That explains my 20 years of depression. Usually that lie, which is what it is for her, it's like, this is the thing that's caused all of this, is carrying the weight of a lot of other things.
Right.
Right? It's like, I need a reason to explain all this, or I need to be meaningful in somebody's life, and I'm happy if that's a negative meaning. Right. I have some significant value in somebody's world, and I can fixate on that because I was the victim, but I have value because I was the object of abuse here. And so it usually is a load-bearing truth for that person. And so if you pull that out, which you have to, then the question is, okay, but what was that functionally for that person all along? Right. Because it wasn't just, here's a negative event I can't get over.
Right.
So it would be curious.
Right. So to me, this is right to the heart of the intimacy crisis. The problem is we think of things in terms of events and direct cause and effect. And the fact of the matter is, and I'm sure you know this, firsthand, nothing is isolated that much. Nothing. Right? Everything is touching a bunch of other things. Everything's not touching everything else. That's pantheism, basically. That's wrong. But everything is touching other things, and not just 1, 2, or 3, or 4. Right? And there's a bunch of second order effects, right? And drag-on effects. And when we have a thing to fix, we tend to put all the bad stuff with the thing that needs fixed, because we're working on that, and we can fool ourselves into thinking that we're working on listening better, right? Because we have an attention deficit disorder, right? And so, yeah, that's going to fix my listening better problem, so that we're not actually focused on that problem. Because I know lots of people that will sit intensely and focus and don't have ADHD and still not hear a damn word you say. It's rather amazing, right? But also, I mean, and I think Peterson talks about this, although I might be misremembering. Like, I think he said like it was a visible change in her instantly, which I
Mhm.
have seen in people. I've seen in people when they're stressed out about something, they're fine, and then they're talking about something, they get stressed out, and I say, "Well, have you ever thought about this?" And they just relax, and they're just like, "Oh, no, I hadn't thought about that." And then all of a sudden, they're back to the way they were before they started talking about the trigger thing, the trauma or whatever it is, right? And they just kind of move on with their day. And like that's always, in one sense wonderful, in another sense frightening to me. Like, whoa, that's weird that, but people are like that, and that's good. Like I'm glad I've kept my sense of wonder and healthy fear at seeing that, because it's it's good to experience the world that way over and over again if you can possibly manage it. So, but I think that's part of the intimacy, is not realizing intimacy is not merely the fact that there's a quality relationship between two things or two persons, hopefully, or a person and an object, but also that relationship, whatever quality it has or qualities it has, is also connecting out to other things, right? So you can't remove the other person and expect no result. This is why divorce is so devastating on children. It's like
Mhm.
you can't say this is between the parents. There's children involved,
Yeah.
and I like well, like they're gonna be impacted, and you can say we're gonna minimize the impact, but like realistically, when you divorce, your kids are not seeing how healthy male female relations unfold in real
Mhm.
time. And
Mhm.
we're very mimetic creatures. We mimic one
Mhm.
another, right? There's all this talk of mimicry circuit and Girard's mimetic desire, which is for the most part excellent, except when he applies it to culture. He has no idea what he's talking about. Um, I'm going to do a video with Justin Wells on that coming up soon, so
Okay.
that'll be interesting. Um, that idea that we mimic is all over the place now, right? Because we sort of rediscovered, right, and then that sort of segues into what John Vervaeke calls participatory knowledge, right? Because how do you get participatory knowledge? Well, you get it through trying to mimic something, right? Trying to participate, trying to mimic a participation, right? The little girl gets a dolly, right? Or a little girl gets a a plastic kitchen set, right? A little boy gets a Lincoln log set, right? Or some Legos to build things because daddy builds things, right? Or whatever it is. And so we're constantly mimicking one another. Like, fair enough, that's definitely happening. And there's a desire to do that. Fair enough, that's definitely happening. But we're not recognizing that that means that there are relationships that if you change them or break them, uh, other things are affected, right? Because
Mhm.
your relationships are not just between you and the thing is affected when you leave that relationship, even if it's a door, right? Like, what good is a door if no one ever opens or closes it? Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of useless, right?
Mhm.
And so you've removed the purpose from the door in some sense. And now apply that to a person. What effect does your absence have on that person?
Mhm.
Right. This is why ghosting is so ridiculously dangerous, and it's in professional interviews. It's been in professional interviews for years now.
Yeah.
Just blows my mind. I'm talking to the freaking vice president of engineering one day, and the next day, no one at the company is returning my emails or my calls. I was
Mhm.
like, I mean, and it's really jarring. It does a
Yeah.
number on you because you feel erased in some
Mhm.
sense. You're like, did all those conversations we had for hours not happen? Did all that interest that you were putting into hiring me, because I didn't know your company existed, right,
Mhm.
suddenly go away? And what does that mean, for like my relationship to the world? You want domicide? Just go somebody after an interview.
Mhm. Mhm. I absolutely agree that people have lost the sense that they connect with the things and the people around them, and that they are meaningful to those people and things. And because things are so, people feel themselves as being so replaceable because they are so frequently replaced. even with parents these days, your kids move out and you're like, great, let's have a party. They're gone. I have other people I hang out with. There's no particular relationship you have with me. Now, that's not all parents, but even some parents demonstrate that now in a way that they didn't 100 years ago. Hopefully this isn't an irritating move, but I am sensitive to the fact that that is also a reality inside of people and how they relate with themselves. And so and this touches back with your discussion on levels of development, but there is very much a sense in which people are unaware of how aspects of themselves impact the other elements of themselves as well. And so the way that you are speaking to yourself, the way that you treat aspects of yourself, it doesn't just stop there. They all touch each other, and it all messes with each other. So if, for example, you are working on losing weight, and so your approach to doing that is to just hate yourself and denigrate yourself, that's going to have a global impact. It's not like that just stays in the one little slice of yourself that you don't like. That goes all over. And the way, so to pull back and talk about the mimetic thing a little bit. Absolutely, the way that you become something new is by mimicking that something new.
Right.
So if I want to become a mother, I have to, with a child or an imaginary child, I have to act out mothering. Now, I can do that mimetically with a particular mother, or I can do that with my idealized mother, whatever that internalized idealized mother is. But I'm acting out a play of what I believe that person would do. And I'm trying to mimic it and do it. But you can't just jump into mimicking. Before you can get to the mimetic, it pulls back to the agopic. So the ability to see yourself as somebody who is capable of living that out means you have to first be in a place where you see yourself as a person. And so a lot of us get this when we are very small, when we are loved by our parents or grandparents, and you get that agopic loving into being. And so we are loved into a self, and then we can imagine ourself as a person who's able to put on these mantles of identity, motherhood. I could be a salesman, I could be a farmer, because you can imagine what that is. And those people who do it, you are one of those people who can put on roles.
Right.
What's very challenging is you have some people who their inner world is so extremely chaotic, and the internal relations, like the way that one part of them and how they relate to the other parts, those things are so unformed, or they are fully formed with self-hatred, despising oneself, anger to others, and all that gets projected on other people. So that's how they experience other people in their world. Any of the words that other people say, they take it on as if it is their own. You kind of get two sides of the coin. And so then you can't even get to the point of being mimetic because you don't have a person who can mimic yet.
Right.
And so this is one of the key things within Christianity is we say, I can love because God first loved me. So I can move out in care because loving is not just like this emotional thing. It's like you can see the mission, you can see what you want to create, the community you want to form, the farm you want to cultivate, whatever it is you're wanting to love into being. I can move forward and fulfill that role because I am already loved into being myself.
Right.
And so if you don't get that from a primary caregiver, you can still receive that becoming if you can open yourself up to receive that care, which most people who have not received that early on find extremely difficult, which is why you have to start with faith or trust, because you're willing to receive that personing, which then will allow you to go out and be a person. And so I think that those layers of the mimetic are huge, but there are a lot of people who aren't even yet ready to mimic.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I want to a lot of things occurred to me. Always super useful talking to you. So I appreciate this.
Okay.
I want to sort of say, also, your mind, your imagination, your imaginal realm, if you will, is always chaotic. Like, just
Mhm.
look at a baby, uh, come back, before you try to disagree. Go look at a baby for a while, like an hour, and then come back to me and see if you don't agree, right? And then the process of raising a child is formation, not education at all. Education is just a wrong word; it's a bad word. It's formation, and that's what you're doing. But then, if what happens is you can or you do switch to your internal state as your primary mode of understanding the world, then you run into a problem because your fantasies, your imagination is never wrong and everything is perfect. Like, everything in my head is perfect, Kat. You've no idea. You've no idea. It's so awesome. I
I
have a
would,
purple talking unicorn. Did I mention my purple talk? And I have a harem and a loving,
ooh,
devoted wife
ooh,
in my head. Oh, absolutely. And
at
a
the same
jet.
time.
It's such a cool jet, and it's like I have a driver. It's fantastic. You should come visit. You really, you'd you'd be wrapped in luxury. And I think that when we're not out in the world, when we're not forced to deal with our imaginations being wrong, our fantasies being bad predictions, bad projections, bad maps of the world, then there is no intimacy because, like, in my head, there's no conflict between harem and loving wife because there doesn't need to be. Your imagination just doesn't have that constraint. It's like, because you can imagine it. So I can imagine that being true, even though that's not a possibility, right? Like, it's not going to happen. And so, not without unbelievable side effects. And, we can look to history and see what happens when you try to pull that trick. It may work for 10 or 20 years, even, but it doesn't work out in the end. Like, Caesar thinks he's got a pretty good deal until everybody stabs him. It's like,
Yep.
and that's the story over and over and over again in history. Like, oh, I've achieved the pinnacle, and now France has betrayed me, or Germany's betrayed me, or
Yeah.
Russia's been mean, so I'm going to be mean to Russia. Whatever it is, right? I'm going to blow up the world because I don't own it. Yeah, we always get into that. We always see that pattern in the species, and the thing that mitigates that is the real world. It's
Yeah.
like trying to calm somebody down and have it not work and go, or worse yet, I calm them down the last 6 times by doing this, and the 7th time it doesn't work, and you're like, wait, what's going on, right? And it's like, oh no. Or just like trying to get along with somebody who's having a bad day, who normally you've never met them. Like, I've never met you have a bad day, to the best of my recollection, Kathyrn. You're always the nice, sweet person that I remember. But I think the odds that you would not snap at me, given a bad day and the wrong conditions, are zero. I'm sure that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And I only say that because I have a lot of experience with people, and it just turns out that people are damned unstable, and
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that. But when we don't have a check on our imagination, because maybe we can curate the world. The nice thing about this is, if you say something I don't like, I can click end recording and never post it online, ever. And you'll have wasted your time, unfortunately. And you know me, I would never do that, because people disagree with me all the time. And I'm just like, cool, I'm learning something, potentially. So it's not a big deal to me. But other people they'll do that. They'll just flat out disengage the minute something doesn't go the way they want it to. And like, some of this is, trolls take advantage of this, right? They're like, you're going to disengage when I bother you enough, and that's their power, right? Is to get people to
Yeah.
disengage because I move the world, which is technically true, but also you're a scumbag, and maybe you should be mean, not be mean, and be nice, right? I don't know, be nice to people. That's a good message. um, they don't have a check, because if you did that to me in real life, and I've told people this, in fact I've done it, I'll punch you or backhand you. I'll physically damage you, for sure, for sure. I've done it many times. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not going to get away with that in person. And
Yeah.
when you can get away with it, it just warps your view of everything around you. and you don't have an intimate relationship. I mean, honestly, if there's no threat of somebody pushing back on you, there's no intimacy in the relationship at all.
There's no intimacy, and it creates a ton of anxiety. Because on a certain level, if there's never any reality checking, you're like, so I guess I have all the power and everything is just in my mind. And so where am I going and what's going on and does anything matter? And if there's no boundary, the lie you get told is if there's no boundaries on you, then you experience ultimate freedom. But that's not true. If there's no boundaries, you experience yourself as no agency. Like imagine swimming through space. You're going nowhere, doing nothing. You're just flailing around in the void. There's nothing that produces a feeling of security, of progress, of anything positive about that. That's why kids go crazy, and almost all adults go crazy if they don't have constraints on them. There's constraints, like people who don't have a job get depressed very, very quickly. There's no constraints on their time, their attention, their energy. They're free to do whatever they want, which feels great for like 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden they start going haywire because you need those constraints, because that actually is what gives you leverage in space. If you want to move forward, you have to find something solid to push against so you can have leverage to move somewhere. And without those constraints, if you're just left in your imaginal world, that's hell. Like there's nothing good there, even if it feels fun for the beginning, because you know it's not real.
Right. Well, and you can't see without contrast.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, constraints are contrast. Like you can't go there. That's contrast the places you can go. And now you can see the places you can go and see them more deeply and see them better. And I think that's super important. It's another thing that people miss. Like you want that. You want to be able to see that you're moving. You want to be able to see where you're moving. You want to be able to see directionally where you're going. And you can't see that from your own perspective. Like if you're digging a hole, you don't know which direction that hole is going in.
Yeah.
There's no way to tell because you're in the hole, right? And you can use a bunch of proxies and convince yourself that those proxies are real enough to approximate where you are, but it just so turns out that that can't be true. Not that it isn't true, it cannot be true. You cannot understand direction by one point or one perspective. It makes no sense to talk about direction in terms of where I am now and the fact that I'm moving. That doesn't resolve the issue at all.
Yeah. So have you come up with any solutions or the beginnings of solutions for the intimacy crisis?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, our sort of weakness in the Mark of Wisdom project overall, aside from just organizing and getting more feedback on what we're trying to do, although we're fixing some of that soon, is the lower practices. So we've got a very good practice that we're about to test out here, and Father Eric brought it up on his live stream, Sunday live stream there. Exploring narrative meaning is the name we're toying with. The problem with that practice, other than the fact that it's freaking amazing, is that you can't just hand it to people, right? You have to have other practices that you've already done that prep you for this. I don't want to call it an advanced practice, but it might be. But it's certainly not a novice practice. It's not a practice that you can just hand out to people. It in itself is staged. So like you start out as a participant, like you don't start out doing the practice. You start out witnessing the practice, right? And this goes back to mimetic desire, which seems to work in this case. A lot of people that watch the practice want to actually participate, at the next level. So where we're kind of stuck to some extent is in how do you get people who are, say, in particular, my specialty obviously is online. I kind of grew up online, and how do you get them offline to engage, with a regular disciplined event or set of events, right? And then there's the whole question of who or what is going to run that, and that's the bulk of the work that we're really pushing on now, is getting feedback on that set of documentation, which is actually written, It needs a lot of refinement, obviously, so that we can get people setting these up locally, right? Because it's got to be. I mean, online's great, and we're going to do lots of online work. We've always done online work, not a big deal. But like, you really need this in person locally, because again, that's where you get the real pushback. You get some pushback online, um, but ultimately, you can always just click off. Like, you can always just hang up on Discord or leave a server, or you
Yep.
know stop a recording and not publish things, or people can stop watching in the middle when they hear stuff they don't like if it's all women, it's not all women, it's you. Like, they can just, oh, I'm not listening to that guy anymore.
Yep.
So the real question is, how do you get people some amount of discipline so that they will engage in something difficult, right? Because, well, I like Jonathan Peugeot's answer ostensibly of just go to church. That doesn't work for meaning crisis people even a little bit. Like, they have no reason to go to church. You can tell them all of your meaning crisis problems will be solved by church, and maybe that's even true. Because I'm not even going to attempt to push back on that. But there's no draw for them. And the fact that you have a problem and that there might be a nebulous solution in this thing that you have no understanding of is not a draw to people. It's not a hook.
And even if a lot of them are like, okay, I'll try it, their problem isn't going to be solved within a couple of months of going to church, which means that most people then are going to stop going to church, even if they went in the first place. So if they trust you and they try it, the solution is not that fast, and then they will walk away. So.
Exactly. Well, and our thesis, from all our work, is that the main problem with that advice is they are so far away from being able to get out of church what church has to offer that no amount of time is gonna help them. And I think that deep confusion is between the meaning crisis people, right, and the crisis of faith people. And the crisis of faith people who have the skills because they had the mimetic exemplification of going to church when they were younger, and they just dropped out at a certain point. It can be 10, it could be 12, it doesn't matter, it could be 22, it doesn't matter, right? And then are reintroduced to church. Yeah, probably the best answer for them is just start going to church again, because they have the skills to engage, because they were already given those skills through mimicry, whether they realize it or not, right? That education, even though I don't like that word, right? That is there. That skill set is still within them, but dormant.
They can kind of turn the programming back on, run the program they've had shut down forever. And even though they might be a little rusty and forget what the different buttons do, they can run the program. Other people, it's like a whole new operating system, and there's no like guidebook, unless you try to play with it for 15 years, and then you'll get the guidebook.
Maybe. I mean, I think it's a loss of skill. I like that you gave the computer analogy and not me. Thank you. So it's if there's a skill of understanding symbolic interpretation, or understanding the value of symbols, even, right, or understanding the language of creation, to quote Richard Peugeot's title, then that skill has to be cultivated in some fashion. And if it's not cultivated within the church at a young age, just because you're forced to go because your parents form you, and that's just the way that works, because maybe they didn't, right? Maybe you don't have it. Then how do you get that skill? And so that's very much our focus. I mean, that's the Navigating Patterns YouTube channel focus. That's the Mark of Wisdom focus for the website and the Discord, right? And I think to a large extent, is someone like Jordan Peterson, and I do make this case on the petersonsphere.com on my article there. What he's doing is he's saying, see this stuff we've been ignoring, myth and symbols and all that, there's stuff there that's super important that people need. And I think to some extent, John Vervaeke points this out, right, with his science of meaning that kind of overlays on top of Peterson's work. There's a value to this that is not immediately apparent, right, but has all the riches, we'll say, you're looking for. And I like sort of what we went over in the beginning about wisdom, right? You've got all these wisdom clips, and I would say there's no such thing as wisdom out of context. And I think in particular, and this is very much misunderstood by Westerners, the East is very good about talking about this, right? Because they have a whole stories about, well, master, you gave me this advice yesterday, and now you're giving me the opposite advice today. And then the master explains, yeah, because it's a different day, you idiot.
Yeah.
Like, and the Western Buddhists, which is everybody in the West, unfortunately, don't they misinterpret that as, oh, it's the tension of the opposites, is some other garbage. It's not. You need to talk to somebody who grew up in China. They'll explain it to you, or Korea, or Vietnam, or Japan. They will explain it to you differently. They will not put it in the Hegelian dialectic or whatever you're calling it this week. That's not going to happen. That's not the Eastern way at all. And we've misunderstood these things, right? And now everything's tension and it's opponent processing instead of cooperative processing, which I kind of prefer cooperating with you, Kathyrn, rather than being your opponent. I just, it's silly me, I know, but I just rather do it that way than the other way. And Peterson's good at pointing out that this stuff sticks stuff together, right? Not in the scientific way, but things get stuck together. It's one of the reasons why I absolutely love Universal History. Richard Rowland and Jonathan Pinchot's series is just great, right? Because they're just like, we're just going to take all the stuff and stick it together. And we don't care about whether or not it's got sort of concordance in like the archaeological findings or whatever. Which, by the way, it often does. But we won't talk about the fact that science is lying to you today, because we'll leave that for another video. So yeah, but I mean, like, it is about sticking things together, and that's what intimacy is recognizing that things are stuck together in a qualitative way, not a quantitative way. It's not 300 friends on Facebook. It's 4 good friends in my neighborhood, right? Way more valuable. And that's a quality, right? The quality of the relationship you have with people in your neighborhood can be, if you cultivate it correctly, and that's work you have to do, much better than 1,000 Facebook friends or 10,000 Facebook friends.
And because not everything sticks together, there are true patterns that do stick together. Yes. You do also have perennial wisdom. So there is the wisdom, like you're saying, in the East, where it's like different day, different wisdom, because the context matters. But there are some things where this is a perennial, like in every situation at all times, this is the wise, maybe not way to navigate the path, but this is the wise
step. Like
the wise step. This is the right goal to pursue. Or even you might have to figure out how to do this, but this principle will be true. Like, you should honor your mother and father. Now, if your parents are abusive, that's going to look different than if your parents are loving and attentive, but you're still figuring out how to navigate the problem to get to that pattern. What does honoring look for you? And that's going to give you benefits in your internal state, your relations with others, your relationship with your future self. If you honor your parents, you get all these benefits, but it'll look different. So that's where different day, it's not, my version of that's not going to be the same as your version of that. And it shouldn't be, because we have different parents and we're different people. But if we're not honoring our parents, we're going to lose out on a lot of wisdom and a lot of strength. So, I agree. Yeah, I feel like we struggle with integrating Eastern wisdom and Western wisdom right now.
Right. Well, we're just misusing Eastern wisdom, probably due to Alan Watts and the fact that all he ever talked to were people who were rejected from their faith and were technically heretics, is what we call them in the West, who had fled to California. Maybe not the best sampling for like what true Buddhism is like, Alan. But we've taken on his interpretation of bad teachings by people who were kicked out, and probably not the best plan in the world. But I like the way you sort of framed it, right? Which is, there are ways to honor your mother and father. My parents were divorced when I was 7 years old or something. I don't remember before time. I can't remember before time events very well. And yeah, what does it mean to honor them? And I only found out after my mother passed away that my father had no idea. Everybody else knew, by the way, literally every other human being. My father had no idea that my mother was nuts. Or at least not to the extent. I mean, my mother was really crazy. Like, it's amazing. But like, she didn't have any lifelong friends at all.
Mm.
Zero. Which, always just breaks my heart to think about. Um, and I had no idea how much sort of infrastructure she was holding in her head, and how many systems she was holding in her head to make the world make sense, until she was basically on her deathbed. And then she couldn't do the trick anymore. And then she was just like saying all kinds of stuff. And I was like, Mom, that just doesn't make any sense. I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're not clear and communicating anymore. And that would come and go, right? Because again, there is this cycle. Some of it's daily, some of it's hourly. um
Yeah.
some of it correlates with glucose cycles and circadian rhythms and all the other stuff that, yes, I actually do know something about. Right, but it also doesn't help you at all. Just saying, unless you're sick, it won't really do much for you to know you have a glucose cycle. It won't help. um you know Holding all that together, you couldn't tell. You couldn't tell. My mother was ridiculously brilliant, obviously, because she held all this stuff together. And it took me years to figure out, like, she used to get very upset if she saw something and you didn't see the same thing. And like the last time it happened that really clicked for me was, she was driving me back to the airport the first time. I think it was the first time I flew down to South Carolina to visit her, and it was foggy. And the stupid maps took us to the old airport entrance, long defunct airport entrance. So we were driving around the airport underneath the, just below the hill that the airport's on, in the fog, and a plane was landing. And I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but man, go to an airport in the fog and watch a plane appear out of nowhere, like right in front of you, and then disappear with fog going like this around the wings. It's a transformative experience. So I have seen this before a couple of times, because I'm very, very fortunate. I'm very blessed, uh, especially for things like that. And in this particular case, I was looking down at my phone because I'm trying to figure out where we are. We need to get to the gate because I gotta go. Like, I gotta hop a plane. Like, I gotta get back home.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. And she said, "Oh wow, did you see that?" And she was driving, and I'm like, "No, Mom." And she got very upset at me, and I was like, "I was looking at my phone." And then she calmed down a bit. But that's because she never knew if what she was seeing was real. And it wasn't actually until I didn't have the insight then. I had it afterwards, maybe on the plane on the way home. I don't remember. Oh, she's never sure if what she's seeing is something other people can see or not. That's why she gets so upset.
Yeah.
And I never really understood that, until very, very late in her life, just before she died, pretty much a few years before. So, we never know people. Like, we don't. Like, there's always more to them. And, I couldn't tell. And I knew her better than anybody else.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. I can tell a lot of things about a lot of people that people think I can't do, and I have no problem with it whatsoever. I couldn't even tell. There was no way. And to this day, she made predictions. She said things that I'm like, there's no way you could ever gather the proper amount of information or whatever to know that. And she was dead on. And it just freaks me out every time I think about it. I have no idea how she did it. No idea. Special insight, brilliance, whatever, angels talking into your ear. I'm open to any explanation at this point. I got none. But that, that goes back to, she had no deep friends. Why? Because she could never trust her own experience. And I don't think you can trust your own experience properly if you're not out in the world getting your experience jostled against, right? Having your experience upset over and over again so you can find the bounds of reality. And this online space does not do you any favors.
To be in the real world, to get jostled against, and then to have the capacity to adjust to that truth.
Right.
Because what happens with a lot of people who end up seriously mentally ill, narcissistic, borderline, whatever, they bump into that and then they negate the reality of the world. And which is why the world seems to become increasingly narcissistic and borderline, because the psychological problems you would normally see exhibiting only with people who had that sort of due to a combination of genetics and upbringing and trauma and whatever, we have created that same environment in the online world.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have issues in the past because you weren't updating despite knocking against reality. Now we just have people not knocking against reality. So why would you be updating?
Right.
Which is a really scary problem because it perpetuates the intimacy crisis. And once those people have children,
Right.
which we're seeing already, we're quite a ways into this. It's like, then how are you parenting your children?
Right. Well, I think, to be fair, that's the real problem, is that we've actually had a generation of kids brought up without any conflict. And therefore they don't have any conflict resolution skills, and they don't have any conflict acceptance skills, right? Because, and this is obviously for anybody who knows me, my struggle, people do not know how to deal with the fact that I will disagree with them. They totally short circuit. And that's why I'm grateful for like Manuel Post, who, he has no problem when I disagree with him, because he'll just disagree right back at me. And that's very useful. Like, he's the most useful person right now, since I sort of discovered Peterson and all that, right? Because he, you can just put out ideas to him, and he has a really good sense, and he'll fight with you on them. Even if he agrees, like he will do the hard work of saying, well, I agree with you, but let's figure out why. Let's make sure that we're not just agreeing because we want to get along, because screw that. Who wants to get along? I don't want to get along. Certainly don't want to get along with somebody from the Netherlands. Ugh. And no one from the Netherlands wants to get along with an American. That's for sure. Not that I blame them. So, we're not interested in placating one another and saying, oh, you said a good idea, you're so smart. Yeah. We have no interest. Neither of us has any interest in that whatsoever. I mean, no offense, if people say empathy and we're both kind of throw up a little in our mouths, like, who would even want such a thing? We're not women with babies. Who needs empathy? We don't need that garbage. That's junk. So having that conflict, I can accept that Manuel and I disagree on a ton of things, a whole lot of very important things that just, it breaks my heart. It's because I think he's wrong, and it probably breaks his heart too because he thinks I'm wrong. So, but we have no problem talking every day, pretty much. None. Zero. It's just not an issue, and these are really important, deep issues in some cases. And people like on Bridges of Meaning Discord server, right? They would just get into these theological discussions and just go at it, and they would have no way to accept, oh, we just have theological disagreement, but you know what? Let's go get a burger.
Yeah, it's the ongoing relationship and the confidence that you will have an ongoing relationship that provides stability to be able to have conflicts. Because if you are raised or you believe the world to be such that any conflict means relationship over, you can't have a conflict, which means either you will become ingratiating and will lie to the person knowing it, or you will demean yourself and say nothing I think matters, so I don't matter, and then you have different issues, or you will become aggressive and maybe subtly, maybe passive aggressive, but in some way aggressive to say, well, then you must submit to me, because if you don't submit to me, then I'll have to submit to you, because one of us must submit to the other for us to relate. But how do you avoid all of that? By having robust relationships with a level of commitment and longevity. In the past, it was you had family, and you had a workplace, and you had a local community, and you all didn't want to starve to death, and so you had to work together and trade with one another, and families intermarried, and you shared edges to your land, and you had all these reasons that made you believe, for better or for worse, this person will be in my life for the next 40 years or until one of us dies. So there will be time to have an ongoing discussion. And I can disagree with you about 20 things, and we're still going to work on the fence again tomorrow. Like, that's just going to happen. Unfortunately, one of the issues with relating with people online, like you said, is they can shut it off anytime. But one of the issues with relating to people around you is they may not have any interest in relating to you. Like your neighbor is probably 120% more interested in going back to their phone than they are in having a conversation with you.
Right. Yeah, just having the option. And I think you know, I want to just make this sort of explicit. We've sort of danced around it. One of my notes is without intimacy, all things are personal, right? Because we cannot discern the personal from the impersonal, right? Or the extra personal, right? We flatten the world, right? Because we're not in the world. And it's odd, right? Because you sort of pointed this out. On the one hand, you get intimacy with navigating conflict, right? Like experiencing conflict over and over again and sort of figuring out, my imaginal realm. On the other hand, the thing that allows you to have a conflict with somebody and still be friends is the intimate relationship, right? It's a quality of the relationship, because at the end of the day, let's suppose like something impossible happens, like this conversation just goes crazy and you say something just terrible, or I say something just terrible, and now we can't make the recording, and like maybe there's no way to edit it to make the talk work, and I just scrap the talk, and then you get upset at me and you're like, you wasted my time, and I set aside time especially for you to talk to you about this issue, and it's important to me too, and now I can't trust you anymore. What am I going to do, right? We have a relationship, and it's not like, I gave you some feedback on Thunder Bay, and therefore you owe me a couple of YouTube. No, that's definitely not how that works. Or one time I said something clever, so now you feel beholden to me to give me your time. No, that's not how that works. And it is, we have a quality of a relationship, right? And built up over time, over years at this point. And not as deep as I would like, right? Not as qualitative as I would like. We've met once. This is we have to rectify that. So and it just has to be fixed. I wish you would come down to Symbolic World Summit with us, but that's okay. Maybe you'll do Thunder Bay again, and we can do it all. We could do it all up in Canada again, because it's a lovely drive, if nothing else.
Do you think people would actually all travel back to Thunder Bay again? It was a lot of out of the way for people.
No, I think they'd do it.
Well, then maybe I'll do it again. Well, to what you're saying, like, why would people do that? Like, the thing is, most people are incredibly conflict avoidant. They find it emotionally, like, aversive. They do not like it. So there has to be a reason for people to go through this process. There's some disagreeable people who enjoy the disagreement. That is the vast minority. Most people do not enjoy disagreement. It is upsetting for them. So you need to have a reason why. So, like, why am I talking to you? You're right. It's not because you were encouraging and have made many clever comments. I appreciate those things, but I'm not putting aside hours of my day to have real intellectual engagement because of that. It's like, well, why? Well, there's two reasons why. One reason why is we're building something together. We both have a problem that we care about, that we're looking to solve. We actually have a cluster of similar problems that we like exploring the ideas around, with the hope that some engagement will help us or other people, and maybe even all of society, move in the direction that we both see as the direction that society should move towards. So we have a shared goal, a shared ambition, and we both approach that goal in a similar yet different enough way that our conversations are productive. Right. So that's one reason. The other reason is you and I both value one another as people. I find you to be intelligent, articulate, and you think differently than I do, but you will give me space to explore my ideas. And you treat me as if you think that I'm intelligent and articulate enough to engage with, and that I give you enough space to explore your ideas productively. So this relationship is valuable because as a person, I find you do help me to do those things, but also just as a person, I've spent enough time that I'm invested in you. and I care about you, and I would be sad if you were hurt, and I want you to do well, and I would enjoy more time talking or face to face out canoeing or just something non-intellectual. So there's the personal connection and intimacy, but the the driver that makes it worth investing all the time that we do into the conversations is the shared communal goal. And I think if people who in general, unlike you, don't enjoy the conflict, they have to have some kind of shared goal that they think is worth the distress of conflict to pursue.
Right. Right. And I think the problem with those types of goals or purposes, or aims, if you will, is that they are not of the nature that can be, we'll say, stated clearly and precisely and accurately enough by propositions. And so you end up with, well, there's no money in it. Right. Because the money is a nice, discrete, linear, one-to-one sort of relationship. Like, I'm going to do a thing, it's transactional, procedure, I'm going to get a thing. I know what that thing is. When I have a conversation with you, we didn't prep for this at all. So, I didn't know where it was going to go. I didn't even know where I was going to start the conversation, to be honest. Partly my fault for not doing my homework. Fortunately, I'm good at this, so years of practice. I don't know what you're going to say. I don't know the therapeutic framing, the psychological framing that well. I do know that you're very smart because you agree with me about the DSM-3 being the end-all be-all. So I know that. At least you're not insane like some of these other people who think the DSM-4 and 5 are valid. So yeah, I mean, there's little things about, well, what is your goal? Because like you stated a bunch of things, and I agree with all of them, and none of them are even remotely inaccurate. They might be a little imprecise, which is kind of the point. Like, yeah, we want to change people's lives for the better. And that's going to mean something different in every case, right? But we're hoping that it exaps out, to use fancy Vervaeke words, it exaps out to being able to do this for lots of people that we don't need to have a deep personal in-person connection with, which would help, or even an online connection with, because I'm still doing this online. So says Manuel, right? So there's a bunch of people with us. We're still online doing the hard work of actually trying to shepherd people through this process of getting out of the transactional, right? Getting comfortable with conflict. Obviously, if you're going to talk to me, you're going to get comfortable with conflict, or you're going to leave. Like, there's no two ways about it. The whole time you're talking about people don't like conflict, I'm like, what kind of freaks are these? What's wrong with these people? Obviously, they're broken. Conflict is how you learn, damn it. And I think that is really the heart of the matter, is people are not learning, they're not experiencing, they're not understanding their emotions even, because they're not engaged in the hard work of actually conflicting with people, learning to navigate conflict and what that means. Because once you navigate it, once you develop these further relationships with people, oh, I like baseball, you like baseball, oh, tell me this baseball fact, right? Oh, okay, the fact that we disagree on politics isn't so important because you also like Babe Ruth, right? And I think you probably know this, but other people might not know this. I have a deep dislike for Canadians, not French Canadians, because they're my people and they're the best people in the world, obviously God's chosen people. But the other Canadians, I had a Canadian girlfriend, and that was a complete catastrophe. That actually was not my fault, although I'm sure I had my long list of sins in that relationship. That was not my fault for sure. And it was bad. And so I have a dislike of Canadians in general. I always joke with this about Peterson. I'm like, I have no idea why I like Jordan Peterson. First of all, he's Canadian. I don't like Canadians unless they're French Canadians, right? Second of all, he's a psychologist. I despise psychology. Despise it. It is the worst thing ever. Third of all, he taught at Harvard. I hate Harvard. I've been to Harvard. I've talked to people from Harvard. Ugh, not liking them. Peterson, love the guy. Absolutely love him. So,
and here you are talking to me. So,
and I'm here talking to you. Right. Now, so I mean, I think people don't get that sense though that there's a lot of conflict. Like my life is full of ridiculous amounts of conflict sometimes, and I just like whatever, dude. I got things to do. Like I got a butterfly to go look at. I have a pond. The river otters come and visit. There's geese. There's blue heron. The blue heron comes. The egrets come. Oh yeah, the river otters are the coolest. They'll just like jump in and out and play. They're clearly playing. They're clearly just playing by the water's edge, right out the window, 12 feet from the house. It's beautiful to watch. And you hear the owls, right? There's butterflies, dragonflies, all kinds of critters just all around my yard all the time. And I think every once in a while a deer will go by my office. Um, Crazy. There's constantly birds, cardinals, all kinds of stuff. Hummingbirds. There's hummingbirds. We got to get them back. So I don't, and then all of that conflicts with me because I don't know if you've met Canadian geese. I think the theory about them is true. That basically there's a ritual in Canada where once a year the Canadians get together and put all their hatred and anger into the geese and then send them south because Canadian geese, if you're around them, they will go after you and
I was
be
attacked
noisy at
by
you.
Canadian geese when I was a kid. It was very frightening. They are scary, nasty birds.
And they're big. They're not
Yeah.
they're not small. And yet, I'm okay with them being in the yard, even though they make a freaking mess. And they can be mean. We seem to get along okay now. They've over the years they've kind of mellowed out. They're like, all right, you're cool. We're not gonna get too upset. And I'm like, well, that's nice. It's my yard. And you ain't paying rent. Um,
Hey, they
you know,
give you
and
free fertilizer, so
And that's one way to look at it. So there's all this way that I blow off the conflict. One of the things I really liked about Peterson, he said introverts seem to need to be outside to recharge. And I'm like, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. Because I just get overwhelmed in the crowd. I mean, I don't know if you noticed at Thunder Bay, but the more people that are around, because my brain tries to track everybody, and you can't do that, And so it's like, ah, and then somebody will come out of the middle of nowhere and do something crazy. And I'm like, what do I do? How do I act? Help. Yeah.
yep,
I,
yep.
I mean, even walking in, right? So I walked in and I had Ethan with me, but we walk in and somebody goes, Mark, I know you. And I realized immediately I had absolutely no protocol, no way to handle meeting somebody who knew me online, but I didn't know them because of the YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? Please save me. Somebody say, and no one saved me, Kathyrn. No one. I had to figure it out on my own in the moment. It was very scary. I'm still traumatized by Thunder Bay. So yeah, and just coming to that realization, like I've lived my whole life and that's never happened to me before. And here I am going to a simple conference with a lot of people that I know, like a lot of people I knew. And
Yeah.
and yet here comes some random person who's never even commented on my YouTube channel. I have no clue who this person is. And there's no possible way that I could have had a clue. And now I have to like be nice to him somehow or interact with him or like I need a politeness protocol. Like, if politeness fixes that. And I think it's no coincidence that, one way into intimacy, into a quality relationship or even any kind of relationship is politeness.
Mm-hmm.
And we've kind of dropped the politeness from the conversation and from society in general. And I think that goes along with dropping dress code because then you're losing signal. What is the status of this person? How should I address them? Is it ma'am and sir, or is it hey dude? I kind of default to dude sometimes, for better or for worse. But also, I mean, I went to school at a private Catholic school for a while. Suit coat and tie every day, and dress shoes. It's serious. And if you didn't, like, they would send your ass home. Oh yeah, they were not screwing around, and I am grateful for that. I liked it anyway at the time, but like, I think that was super helpful to me later in life to have that discipline, to have that. I mean, it was a conflict, right? Like, who wants to get up and dress in a suit and tie every day? Zero people want to do this. I assure you, it is a pain. Like nowadays, this is a huge affordance for you, ma'am, and for my viewers. I just had a crappy, some no doubt snarky T-shirt on before this, and I threw this nice shirt on. We won't even get into the jammy bottoms. So I'm not wearing jammy bottoms. But yeah, normally it'd be like short and t-shirts because I live in South Carolina. It's nice and hot today.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to dress up? But there are times when you really should like dress up. I go out to an entrepreneurship meeting, I dress up, because
Well,
I want a certain image.
well, and to link it into earlier in the conversation, it's part of the like physical path that allows us to put on our identity, which allows us to interact with other people. So I might not be feeling particularly good in the morning, but when I dress professionally, go to work, I'm shifting which mode of interaction I'm in. And so I'm putting on my game face kind of thing, meaning a number of the things that are on my mind, concerning to me, those get put on the back burner and maybe off the stove completely. Those are removed, and what comes in is a new salience map. And I have new concerns and a new way, as most people do, different posture. I speak slightly differently. It's not intentional, but when you live in a mode for a while, you have different aspects to yourself that get more developed as you live them out. So I have a more professional side when I put on my lanyard with my name tag, and I, you put on a mode. And so that allows you to have a different kind of relating to people, because I'm going to relate to you differently as a teenager when I'm a counselor in your school than I am if you're a friend of my kids.
Right.
It's just, of course you will. It's inappropriate to swap those over. But how do you get the boundaries that allow you to easily make the transitions between modes in life? It's how you dress. And one, online, you don't have that at all. So it's very muddy, very messy. And like you said, it's a very good point. We don't have clear boundaries between professional wear, casual wear, even people, it used to be go to church, suit and tie. Now, flip flops and shorts are fine. And I understand why people have made these changes, but it also then puts more of a burden on you to consciously make the choice to change. All of those things allow you to offload a lot of the conscious activity, which makes living out those modes less effortful. And so
Right.
we've adopted a mode of life that is more effortful, which means it's less likely it will actually happen, which means we end up being disrespectful to other people and not optimizing our use of those different modes. And you end up having professionals that aren't that professional and people in their casual life who aren't building up intimacy because they're still kind of in business mode. And so it's not as helpful for us because we can't actually process all that all day. It's too much to decide.
Right. Yeah. So by not drawing those physical boundaries with dress and location, right? It's well studied, the whole work from home thing. If you don't have an office in your home, you're less likely to be good at your job, right? Your productivity goes way the hell down. I've always had an office in my home for other reasons, so doesn't really affect me the same way. But also when I'm in the office, there's a certain way in which for certain jobs I get more done than if I was at home. And the opposite is also true. There's certain tasks that I really need to be at home for. That's why I always preferred the hybrid thing, where I could wander into the office when needed, and not every day. That was always very useful to me. Um, but other people can't pull that trick at all ever. That's good to know. But without the dress code, without the politeness codes, without the signals, those additional signals, yeah, because one way to talk about what you just outlined is we have multiple identities, right? Like camp counselor, therapist, mom, whatever, right? Like so many identities, good friend to somebody, right? Neighbor, whatever it is. You're someone's daughter, presumably, right? Like these are all different identities that you hold. And what I see with the so-called identity crisis, or these identity politics, it's like reducing identity down to politics. I can't think of too many worse ways to double down on flattening two frames at once. They're trying to get to a single identity, right? I mean, it's this. I've struggled with this my whole life. People would be like, "What do you do for a living?" And I'm like, Am I going to rattle off a dozen things? Because I mean, my jobs have always been glue jobs between different departments and divisions and types of things. I've never like, oh, you're a software engineer. No, I mean, even like maybe my second professional job, I was tech support, tech writer, software engineer, right? All at once. Like I was doing all of that at once. Um, it was never like, well, what do you do? Right, and to some extent, I don't have a specialty, for better or for worse. I'm more of a jack of all trades in computers, so that's
Mhm.
why I'm more of a technologist than anything else. Um, but those are hard questions to answer. Even just that, like, what do you do for a living? Man, I do so much. I do a lot of translation. That's mostly what I do. It's translate things from one language to another, spoken or written, programming or otherwise. Right? I just do a lot of that work, and because I can, and it kind of comes naturally to me, so it's sort of effortless. And I add a lot of value according to people. In a lot of situations. But like I'm not the world's best software engineer, that's for sure, right? I might be the world's best DevOps engineer, different problem. But I'm not the world's best like network troubleshooter guy, but I'm way above average, but I'm not the best by any means, um, because I don't do it every day, right? And things people do every day or once a week or once a month even, they're just better at them than I'm going to be because there's nothing that I stick on that long over that period of time for various reasons. And there's nothing wrong with not being a specialist in that way. Generalists can bounce around a lot more, but there's no identity there either, right? Like,
Mhm.
ooh, so it gets kind of tricky. What is my professional identity? Like, what jobs are best for me? It's hard for me to fit that into the world as the computer industry in particular got more and more sort of job title centric.
Mhm.
Right, because it's like, well, yeah, I can do software analysis work. That's not a problem. Oh, but you haven't been a software analyst anywhere. Well, actually, I've done a software analysis work at like 90% of the places I've worked. Just that wasn't my title,
Mhm.
right? It was part of my job, right? Because lots of things were part of my job at these
Yep.
places, right? And then people want a single identity just for the workplace, but now we want a single identity for everything.
Mhm.
Oh, you're a communist. Oh, you're a right winger. It's like, what does that even mean? Like, and then we know that because of the way you vote. So
Yeah.
you know all these other things about me because of the way you think I voted.
Mhm.
Because usually they infer how you vote by a comment you made on Twitter.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you about how far away from the ability to infer what you think you inferred you are, because that distance is immeasurable, but also you're in fantasy land. And I think that the problem is without intimacy, without the ability to be intimate, without the skills of intimacy, we have to rely on assumptions for everything. And we rely on assumptions. And assumptions come from where? Our imagination,
Yeah.
right? They don't come from our experience. What comes from our experience is observations. That's the opposite of an assumption. Right. If you can, and sometimes you can't observe and you need to assume, fair enough, but we're relying on assumptions and instead of noting observations. Like a lot of people are upset. They're like, all these people who scream about free speech are trying to squash other people's free speech. And I'm like, well, why didn't you know that was going to happen? They were never principled. Like, you made an assumption they were giving you a principle that they wanted to uphold. That
Yeah.
was never the case, but you were too busy listening to what they said and believing their propositions to notice their actions were not in alignment with those propositions. So you
Well,
made an assumption.
and we're back to projection because you're projecting your principled nature onto those people. And some of the people you're upset with are projecting their manipulative nature onto their opponents.
Right.
And so you see people projecting like crazy, and then yeah, the opposite, the the introjecting, where you see people where, and I think we tend to call them overly online because they've just absorbed all of these perspectives and narratives, and that has become their narrative and their perspective, and they don't have those boundaries, which you would develop through real relationships and real intimacy with people. And so I do think, probably not now because we're running short on time, but at some point, the thought process of to be able to move beyond introjection and projection, you need to be a person. And a lot of what we've done has short-circuited our becoming people when we're young. Like I was saying earlier with the agapic love, you have to be a person before you can mimetically engage with other people, which leaves you left with projection and introjection because you don't have a clearly identified self, which links in with what we were saying, because if you have a core self, then you can swap in a work self and a family self and a baseball coach, and you have roles, but you have a consistent sense of self throughout the roles. So either you flatten it because you can't have the different roles, so it's just me all the time and everywhere with no differentiation, or you swap out between your roles and people are like, you don't even seem like the same person in either place. So there's no, either it's completely flat or there's not enough consistency that there's a core self between those roles. But to get to the point where you can be that core self who can mimetically take on roles and participate in a what used to be normal way in society, you first have to get to the point where you can mimetically engage, which requires the sense of a more developed and articulated from the rest of other things self. So developing that self is for many people still the core task. Now, and you also have people who, like you said at the very beginning, they did that task, then they moved up, they developed into the world, then they got lost in some online canyon, and now they've reverted back down to a lower form of themselves. So thinking and talking about the development of that self in adults, like let's not even worry about kids right now, like an adult, how do you do that now? In a way that's not just go to therapy, because yeah, you'll get some good therapists who realize that's the problem and will help you achieve that like end state. But a lot of therapists are not even going to see that as the goal. They tend to take what the client says is the goal as the goal and will go through whatever their trained system is to do that. You have some very good therapists and psychologists who do actually understand those systems and will like develop the person in front of them into a person, but that's not most therapists. So saying go to therapy is not the answer to that either. Sadly. Because it should be. It should, like that was the goal, is to help people develop. But it's devolved over the last 100 years or whatever. And probably all along, you only had a few people who actually had that type of agenda. But it's very difficult because what you're saying is how do you create the pressure and the so you need to, like we've been saying, you need to have these constraints and you also need to have the stability and longevity. So you need to have the love and the stability and the pressure. And so how do you get that? And I get that the answer that Jonathan and Paul have been saying is go to church, because ideally the church provides the structure and the stability. But like you said, for a lot of people, that's a non-starter. So then what do we do? Because it's a whole culture problem.
Right. And I think, again, it's a problem of too many steps, and they're kind of reducing it to one step and not recognizing the loss of skills. Because, to be fair, their specialty is crisis of faith people, and not, the real meaning crisis, hardcore people, which I did talk about with Pastor Paul, because he's very gracious, and we have discussed it before. And yeah, so I think what I hear you saying is that, and I quite agree. Our next conversation should be something like intimacy crisis and sense of self. And that way we can dive into the problem of identity, right? And the problem of personhood and what it means to be a person and all of that. I like this idea of being able to swap in identities once you're a person. I think that's way worth exploring. And so I really like that. And on that note, anything else you want to say before we end it here? Because we are approaching the 2-hour mark anyway, so this is kind of like perfect. But I liked where it went, and I think leaving it off there is a really good idea because we can segue. Hopefully, we can find some time to segue into this sort of next phase of the conversation.
Just thank you for creating time, and I've enjoyed the conversation as always. It's always a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Kathyrn. This is super useful. Don't be surprised if I steal a lot of this and put it in an article somewhere when I get my Substack up and running. Uh, so, no, I really enjoy the conversation. This is very, very helpful for me in particular. So I'm glad you also got something out of it. That's always nice. But I'm pretty selfish, so I'm like, yeah, whatever. At least I got what I needed. So, no, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. It looks like Kathyrn wants to do this again. So we will try to find some time and do yet another conversation. If you haven't seen the first conversation that we had on intimacy crisis, please watch that. I have another one with Andrea with the Bangs on her channel. I'll link that in the description as well. And yeah, I hope everybody thinks more about intimacy and the loss of intimacy and how that's wrapped up in this identity thing and this whole idea of knowledge is the highest value, this age of gnosis propositions thing, and how all of this are, sort of conspiring in a sense to put us in this situation. And we're going to talk more about solutions in our next conversation.